Hi, I'm Erich Toncre, Director of Marketing Education and Assistant Professor of Marketing at Rutgers Business School. It is my pleasure to welcome our audience to the Center for Market Advantage Zoom webinar, Digital Innovations, Applications for the Field, which runs from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. this morning. We have two great sessions scheduled consecutively. Session 1, called Going Digital, will run from 10 a.m. to 10:45 a.m., and Session 2, called Practical AI, will run from 10:45 to 11:30 a.m. this morning. Each session consists of a moderator who will facilitate a discussion with two expert panelists for 30 minutes, each followed by 15 minutes of Q&A from the virtual attendees. I will moderate the first panel session, and my colleague and executive in residence with the Center for Market Advantage, Nagaraj Bukkapatnam, will moderate the second panel session. I will get started by introducing my first two expert panelists for session 1. Manasi Sheth is the Director of Marketing and Inside Sales at ITTStar Consulting. Manasi heads the marketing for this fast-growing startup with a focus on digital transformations and innovations. She has a varied experience in consulting, B2B marketing and business development, having worked with Ernst & Young, Kidzania, and Zespri, amongst others. She has launched various projects and driven multimedia marketing campaigns, along with developing new age digital solutions for different industries. Welcome, Manasi. My other esteemed panelist is Dan Hernandez, an entrepreneur who currently serves as managing partner at Reteligence, a proven, agile, and highly configurable web-based solution that brings business processes to life by connecting workflow, service levels, and multi-channel communications with real-life reporting, performance monitoring. He also serves as a business consultant and advisor to capital investment institutions. Prior to his current roles, Dan served as Executive Vice President of Global Strategy for Sykes Enterprises. In his role, he oversaw corporate development, including mergers, acquisitions, strategic partnerships, and alliances. Prior to working with Sykes, Dan served as President and CEO of SBC, now AT&T Internet Services, a $1 billion business that has led to become America's leading provider of high-speed DSL internet access services and one of the nation's leading internet service providers. Welcome, Dan. Let me first begin our discussion with the concept of digital transformation. There's been a lot of buzz in the past couple of years about digital transformation and its impact on the corporation. Before I ask my first question, let me provide you with a definition of digital transformation from Salesforce.com, and it reads, digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to create new or modifying existing processes, culture, and customer experience to meet changing business and marketing requirements. This reimagining of business in the digital age is digital transformation. So this brings me to my first question, okay? What does this digital transformation mean to you, and why is it important for firms? Manasi, I'll start with you first.
Okay, thanks. So digital transformation is basically the integration or adoption of technology in all areas of business, be it a product business or a service business, and wherein we replace non-digital or manual processes using newer technology.
Okay. Dan, your response to that question?
I see it from a different perspective. For me, it's the dissemination of knowledge and access to information that anyone can act on. It's kind of this revolution in consumerism. And so for a business, it's more of an adaptation to a new way of being where everyone has access to similar information and can act on it. I would equate it to having to transform from looking good to having to being good. And I know we'll talk more about that, but it really is leveling the playing field for the revolution in the customer experience, revolution in driving information down to everyone that was usually only available to the limited few, and now all can act on it. It's really led by how cheap memory is now and how inexpensive processing power is. And so all of a sudden, we've got access to things that we've never seen before and can act as consumers in a very different way. And as a business, it's a transformation from looking good to having to being good. And I know we'll talk more about that.
Okay, so going to follow and continue on the same discussion area about, what digital transformation is about in general. So pulling from Salesforce again, this time a quote directly from the CEO. Let me state what it is. He says, okay, every digital transformation is going to begin and end with the customer. Every digital transformation is going to begin and end with the customer. Let me start with Manasi. Do you agree with that statement? Okay.
Then I think the customer is the centerpiece for digital transformation. So digital transformation only helps organizations find newer ways to reach new customers, to strengthen relationship with their existing customers, or gain maximum insights on those customers. So all in all, it's the centerpiece for digital transformation.
Okay. And Dan, just to repeat my quote again from the CEO of Salesforce.com, every digital transformation is going to begin and end with the customer. Do you agree with that statement?
Frankly, established businesses and institutions hate this. It really is challenging the traditional business model. Because as I mentioned earlier, the difference between looking good and being good. In the past, I could show a flashy commercial as a marketer and manipulate you into buying my product. Now, everyone has access to consumer reviews immediately, and they're not buying the flash anymore. In addition to that, consumers' expectations have risen dramatically now, where I'm looking for more of a frictionless experience where I don't want to talk to you unless I want to. If I have to, I'm having a bad experience. If I've got to call you to figure out how something works, forget it. If I've got to read a 20-page manual to work my iPhone, I'm not having a good experience. I want it to be seamless and intuitive. So my expectations have risen as a result of this. And finally, speaking as a marketer, it's made it hard to tell to reach people. Because now as a marketer, I don't know about you, but I pretty much have an ad-free environment. I watch streaming media on YouTube and I pay for it so I don't see any ads. I listen to Spotify instead of the radio so I don't have ads there. So I'm rarely approached with ads that I don't want to see because I've eliminated them from my environment. So as a marketing guy, now I got to scramble to figure out what to do differently to get consumers to engage with me. So I see it as a very radical transformation.
From my view, Dan, it seems that, or from both of you guys, for both you and Manasi, there's a double-edged sword for marketers, right? So on one hand, we want to know more about our customers. Okay. At the same time, customers have more access to more information and technology. So it's sort of a conundrum that marketers are in, right? Do you agree, Dan?
People worry about their privacy and Facebook tracking them and Alexa listening to every word. Honestly, I don't mind it if you're getting to know me to help me, right? If you're going to say, here's a product or service, Dan, I think you'd be interested in. But if you're stalking me to manipulate me, then I do mind it a lot. And so I think it's really changing the way that we look at relationships with consumers, and that consumers expect relationships with the businesses that they do business with.
Okay, so this brings me to the part in our discussion where we're looking at impact to brand, right? Whether it's something that's a good thing or a bad thing. So let me start with this question. How can digital transformation be helpful or harmful to a firm's brand? Manasi, I'll start with you first.
It is a double-edged sword, but on the positive side or on the pro side, digital transformation definitely helps organizations to reduce business costs and risks because they can make better informed decisions with the insights that they can get, and also with all the automation that's possible. So it helps organizations to be extremely relevant in this competitive world. On the other hand, digital transformation is extremely complex and risky. So if it's done well, it's done in a foolproof manner, the results can be extremely overwhelming. But if it goes incorrectly, if it's done incorrectly, there could be huge cost implications and even embarrassing it could even be embarrassing for the brand or the company. So it's a never-ending process. The firm has to keep up with the capabilities and keep adopting newer stuff. But in the end, there was a quote in Forbes magazine which said 70% of digital transformation still fail today.
And let me follow up on that question to Manasi. We were referring to the Forbes article regards to leading factors. What are some of the leading factors that led to some of these firms not succeeding in digital transformation?
So many contributing factors. One being if organizations go too fast, or if there is not a complete buy-in or an understanding on the roadmap, it could fail. It could also fail because you focus on quantity rather than quality in this race of adapting and adopting newer technologies. So there are many, and also if it is not well integrated in the company end to end. So there are many reasons why this could not work for a company.
And your response to that question?
It all depends on the firm and how you personalize that brand. In the past, a brand was this entity that was this anonymous party out there that you didn't have a relationship with. Now a brand is everything that's represented by that company. Not only the goods and services, but are you socially responsible? What are you doing in the environment? Because we all have access to that now. The message isn't controlled by the brand owner anymore. Now it's controlled by everyone who interacts with it and the way they engage with each other. And so that's put an added responsibility on the brand owners to make sure that what they stand for is not only in what they say, but also in what they do. And if those things don't match up and people find out, and they do find out now, then it's very harmful. And we've seen that over and over again. And the brand isn't just, the Amazon name. It's Jeff Bezos, right? It's the people that make up that brand. And that's very different also, because we didn't know that in the past, right? We didn't have access to all that information. Now we do. Now there's so many social avenues out there that we see it. And so all of that has got to integrate.
Okay, my next question is do companies have to, let's say companies in terms of the majority of employees, have to have complete buy-in with regards to digital transformation for digital transformation to be successful? In other words, agree, accept that this is the right plan for them, the right direction for them to utilize digital transformation, and we have to have complete buy-in from the organization. Manasi, we'll start with you first.
Agree. So the trickle effect from why it is important to undergo digital transformation has to go from bottom up all throughout. So there has to be a complete buy-in from the workforce, from the management. Everybody has to be in sync for this to really work.
Got it. Dan, your response?
A lot of it doesn't work because there's a lack of humility, right? Once you've been a victim of your own success, it's too easy to buy into what you've been telling yourself. I look at someone like Sears, right? Sears, your largest retailer that's now basically become an artifact because they weren't aware and paying attention to how consumerism was changing, right? And the things that were going on. I'll never forget when I took my first executive job in Chicago with Ameritech. This is right when dial-up internet starting, and the company that I was running the internet company for was owned by the Yellow Page company for Ameritech. And I remember telling the Yellow Page executives that I was about to put them out of business. Now, you probably all don't remember this, but I'm an old man. There was a time when the Yellow Pages was the most profitable part of the phone companies, and they loved it. It was a multi-billion-dollar business. It was generating 80% profit margins. It was great because everyone had to use the Yellow Pages. And when I started telling them that's not the case, people are just throwing these things away now. That's, you're about to be gone. They didn't want to hear it and they didn't believe it because they had been successful for so long. So I think that's a big problem with established institutions and saying this is the way that we've always done it. This has been successful. We know people. Well, the world has changed. And I think that it's hard when you've been successful to adapt.
Okay, my next question is, how has the current COVID-19 pandemic impacted digital transformation? Manasi, we'll start with you.
I think KPMG explains this the best. The COVID-19 is the perfect storm for digital acceleration. So all businesses today are having to transform digitally, whether they like it or not. They have to embrace technology to be present in this digital world. So while almost 80+% of companies are working remote, the pandemic is pushing companies to start scaling remote work, to accelerate their digitization, and to also accelerate automation. So jargons like AI/ML, collaborative working tools, business continuity plans are very, very relevant in this pandemic world.
Dan, your response?
It has accelerated things by challenging a paradigm because it forced it, right? So I look at the work at home. People have always been saying that, we could do work from home, it'd be a great thing, and businesses were always reluctant to say, I don't want to lose that control. You've got to come here so I can see you, I can make sure that you're being productive, and if I let you all go home, everyone's just going to be having margaritas by 10 a.m. And what we found is people working at home are actually more productive, but they also still miss that, face-to-face, but it challenged that, it forced that challenge, and it led to show that because of this digital transformation, people can stay connected and be productive, and we can find ways to make that work. It also changed how we act as consumers, right? We started seeing ways that we can integrate experiences, even though we couldn't be face-to-face. One of the things I do now is I own a gym, which has been really challenging in all of this, right? But we learned ways to act differently. We saw the emergence of, how successful Peloton has been, saying, how can I give you a virtual experience that makes you still feel a part of something? And so I think it's really accelerated our thoughts because we have no choice. And through that, it's tested what can and can't be. And I think that's been fascinating.
Okay, the next question I have is sort of like a two-part question. Well, it is two questions, but they all they relate to one another. And I'll start with Manasi. How does a firm get started with the process of digital transformation if they don't have a process already?
The firm is a small, medium, or a large size organization. I think the rules are fairly the same across all kinds of organization. The first thing that needs to happen is they need to create a digital culture. They need to have a company-wide buy-in and prepare the workforce for the transformation. We need to define the strategy and the KPIs and the metrics to measure these KPIs from time to time. And I don't think companies should even try and build everything in-house. Find partners. There are enough and more partners. Find these partners and to help them accelerate this journey and come up to speed. And lastly, take benefit of accessing the infrastructure and the resources that are already present instead of investing in newer resources at this point if there are limited resources available.
Dan, your response to that?
I think it starts with the humility that, oh crap, we're in a situation where our customers and our employees are now in a much more powerful position of driving what we do than ever before. And so we've got to start finding out where they're talking to each other and listen to what they're saying. And that's not an easy thing for companies to do, right? It may take you out of your paradigm to say, okay, let me go see all the crap they're saying about me on Twitter or in Facebook or in these message groups or on Reddit. And honestly, most executives haven't grown up in that world. And that's where the outside help comes in. You've got to find people that have a different perspective than you just to challenge your thinking. Because if you're surrounded by an executive team where you're all about the same age and you've had the similar experience coming up, then it's hard for you to see what's changed. And so I'm not talking about teams of consultants, but I'm definitely talking about teams of people that are in a different generation that see the world differently, who can challenge your thinking and show you something different. And I think that's really where it begins. Because once you have that humility, you can start to adapt. Okay, let's recognize things have changed. Let's find out where we can adapt to integrate differently, to talk to our consumers differently, and to look at our employees differently and the value that they bring and what we're able to give them.
Okay, and the second part of that two-part question is, what are the key resources or competencies necessary to ensure that the process or framework is sustainable? Manasi, we'll start with you first on that question.
Digital transformation is not a one-time process. Organizations have to keep being on top of their game all the time. So if the efforts, if they have to make sustainable efforts, what they need to do is continuously identify and measure these metrics and in the areas of transformation. They also need to keep trying new and more relevant technologies and adopt a strategy which is flexible and there is room for iterations. That's the beauty of digital. So, if something doesn't work, it's quickly possible to change and adapt and iterate the strategy and the roadmap.
Dan, your response?
Taking it out of the buzzword digital transformation and then looking at the cultural change that it is. Having been a C-suite executive, it's so easy to sit in the corporate boardroom in the tower and say, here's the direction that we're going. It's much harder to dig into the details and say, let me go learn from my customers, let me go learn from my employees that are dealing with them on a daily basis, and let me find out the things I don't know. So I think that cultural shift starts with get out of the tower, go learn, and then start adapting and find out from those that have been living it how they do it, right? It's very much changed our paradigm. Even look at education, right? Education is going through a massive paradigm transformation because of things like COVID and digital transformation, and say, okay, let's listen to students, let's listen to employers, let's figure out how we adapt to this new world, because our traditional institutions are challenged now. We've got new things that we've got to learn how to do. But I think that cultural shift really starts by recognizing, okay, I can't call the direction of the play from my corporate boardroom anymore. I've got to get out and I've got to go find out what's going on in a different area.
Okay, so I'm going to open up the Q&A session with the first question. This one was submitted by Devin, and let me read it as such. So companies like Facebook are being more evasive in terms of the practices they're using to get more social data on us as the consumers. So the question is, and that's sort of the backdrop of that question. So the question is, can companies like Facebook still be successful in digital marketing without employing those evasive methods or techniques? Manasi, you want to take the question first?
I think what we are moving towards in the future is making more and more personalized experiences or personalized approach. So the data that is being used is clearly to personalize and customize your approach towards targeting to your audience, and hence this data is extremely important. But let's not get into the ethicality of this at all. That's a long conversation for another time.
Dan, your response?
As a marketer, I would tell you it's extremely important. The days of mass marketing are really a thing of the past. You used to have a few vehicles that you can get your message out there: broadcast TV, broadcast radio, newspapers. Well, all three of those mediums really aren't there anymore. Now you've got streaming, you've got, your services that you're entertaining yourself through Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And so I think that speaking from a marketer, it's extremely important, because now I've got to micro market. I've got to look for a demographic and find a way to get my message into whatever product or service. And yes, it's very evasive. And I'll tell you, so even doing the advertising I do now, I work with the different, internet providers, because they're acquiring all of this, just like Google is. And without it, so much of your advertising becomes irrelevant because you have no idea. But you can make it very relevant to a demographic that wants to buy blue polo shirts on a Tuesday and put it in front of them and, get them to enjoy buying your shirt. And so, yes, it's evasive. I think it's going to become more, prevalent. And even though we've been worried about maybe our privacy in the past, hell, I've got Alexa throughout this house. I've got tracking on my phone all the time. And honestly, my life isn't that interesting anyway. So I don't mind that they're tracking me as long as they can serve me up something that's relevant when I need it.
Okay, here's another question I want to add, and I think it kind of brings up a good point here in case one wants to, be a consultant in this space and they want to be able to, get the process started for a client who's interested in doing digital transformation. So this would be a scenario. So say if you're going in to visit the client for your first couple of meetings, right? And what would you say, what would it be the first three things that you would say or advise your client to do during those first couple meetings?
It would be a diligence across all the social media platforms on what's being said about that company and their products. I'm going to go to Reddit. I'm going to go to Glassdoor. I'm going to go everywhere that someone's discussing, either as an employee, as a consumer, someone doing a review, and I'm going to compile all that to say, let me not only show you trending data, but let me give you specific examples of things that people are saying. Here's how it's easy to do business with you. Here's how it's hard. Here's what I enjoy. Here's what I like about working here. Because usually that's the first wake-up call. Let's see where the need is based upon what all those who interact with your brand are saying. And then from there, we can begin. The key there is that you've got to listen to everything, right? I remember having discussions where people would tell me, hey, I'd read some things on Glassdoor saying, hey, there's an issue here. Yeah, those are just the few people, because most people aren't going to say anything. The only people that are going to say something are people that really like your service or really hate your service. And so you can just ignore it. And we know that's not true. That's just wrong, right? You got to listen to both. And then you got to put a filter on and saying, okay, what do I want to find is relevant? But I'm not going to ignore it. So whether it's an outlier or not, I want to hear it, and then I can make a judgment.
I'd like to start with is to understand the organization's capabilities as to what is currently possible with them, the kind of data they have, resources they have, etc. And basis that, understand the objectives and take it from there on. So understand the objectives, set on the KPIs, and then figure out what you want to do. And most importantly, create a roadmap.
What would be your words of advice to professionals who want to stay fresh or stay relevant in this space? Manasi, we'll start with you first.
Depending on the industry that you're talking about, there are a couple of things that anyone can do. One is you need to make your customer journeys more virtual. There is an abundance growth of online marketplaces as well. So you need to evaluate if that is relevant for your business. There's a need for business consolidation overall, and to tailor make or personalize user experiences, whether it is through use of chatbots, facial recognition, IoT, or any other advanced technologies that we're talking about. But personalization and automation is what you should keep a look for.
Dan, your response?
There's an emotion to this about going through it with the eyes of a child. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So when you think about, as an executive, what challenges you're thinking more than anything is usually your kids who are disagreeing with you about, they're spending too much time on Facebook or whatever. And so you're exposed to different things that you may not have in your traditional media or in your, paradigm. And so when you look at it from an academic perspective, you look at something like TikTok and say, well, that's just stupid. Why would anyone spend all their hours on that? But if you get out of it and you look at it from a fresh mindset as a child and say, well, let me find out what is enticing, because what matters is people are doing it. And so, I tell people I've got the benefit of two things. I've had older children that would challenge my thinking that are now a little past their teenage years. And I've also got a 5-year-old now. And I'm watching YouTube Kids and seeing where media is now presenting ads from bloggers through that, these child bloggers, and that's where the influence is coming from. And so that's what keeps you fresh, right? You've got to get out of your own world and get into the world of those that are experiencing things differently than you have.
The last question, which I think, some of the attendees would be interested in knowing about, certainly as the previous questions we pointed out. Our last one is, certainly when you're going in and talking about digital transformation, and it's seen as a positive or positive, potentially going to have a positive outcome on the firm. I mean, obviously there's some risk inherent with digital transformation and some concerns that we addressed earlier with the brand question. But the thing, of course, a CEO or any of the executives would be asking those who are proposing the changes, how am I going to see the benefit? How do I measure success, with regards to digital transformation? So the question goes as, how do I, if I am the executive CEO, so forth, how do I measure the ROI for digital transformation? Manasi, we'll start with you first.
The ROI depends on the industry again. So if I have to take an example of a customer-focused industry, there are many ways to measure ROI. It could be how has the net promoter score increased, or what is the rate of new customer acquisition or referrals or repeat purchases, etc. But we're talking about other businesses, then I think a good way to judge this is the percentage of revenue or profits that have incurred after the introduction of these new products or services which are digitized.
Dan, your response?
I really think, there are so many great tools readily available to look at the attitudes and opinions towards your products and services when you put those listening posts out there. And I think your ROI really goes in changing in perception, because that's going to be a big leading indicator on what's going to happen further down the road. Once you start pulling levers, you're not going to see immediate increases in sales or decreases in sales. But, these are the things that happen over time. You look at how long it took Sears to go through what it did and how long it believed it could turn things around. And it just didn't happen, right? Instead, you got to look at the leading indicators and say, all right, what are people saying? What are they experiencing? And that to me is the first place where you start to measure your return on the investments that you're making. Now, how do you judge and quantify those investments? Well, that's still a science that we're all learning. But what you do know is how am I influencing perceptions? And then how will that later influence my products and services?
Well, it's our time to close our panel session 1. And I want to thank our panel experts, Manasi and Dan, for their insights, their expertise. And I want to thank the virtual attendees for submitting their questions. I think we had a really great panel. So at this juncture, I want to pass the baton over to Nagaraj, and Nagaraj, take it from here.